Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
By the way, I loved your Players on the Eve of Destruction blog post. That was one of the most literary Noah opinion pieces I've seen. I could tell you were really moved by the spirit.
Thanks. It's every year I write a New Year's essay. And then I write 4 or 5 essays per year. I call them essays because it's just, I try to write like a writer instead of just, super simple explanations. And then I think I do okay. I didn't actually think this was my best one. I think my best one was the one I wrote last year, which was called Toward a Shallower Future. It was about sort of progress, technology, and society. But then this one was, it was darker because it was about war and the possibility of an invasion of Taiwan.
And what is sort of your latest thinking on sort of the potential timeline or likelihood of that?
I'm not a military geopolitical expert. I don't have any specialized knowledge here, but what everyone says is that the time of greatest danger is the remainder of this decade. So it's funny, we're halfway through the 2020s now.
Wow. Crazy.
We have had 5 years of the 2020s.
Wow. Starting
with the pandemic year. It just really, it feels like a really long time. And then in retrospect, it kind of flew by historically.
Yeah.
And, but then, so we're halfway through the 2020s. And I think the consensus is that the remainder of this decade is the time of peak danger. In the early 2030s, a number of things happen. Number one, Xi Jinping will complete his 4th term. And he'll be 80 years old, I think, by the end of that, maybe 79. I don't remember when his birthday is, but he'll be, getting up there in age. And essentially by then, he'll be an old man. And if he hasn't invaded Taiwan, he's probably not gonna. And then either might be power struggles because he hasn't designated a successor yet. And so there might be, he sort of upended the kind of stable system that Deng Xiaoping created and turned it into this personalistic system, and he hasn't really designated an heir. And so famously, when Mao started, going over the hill, you had China fall into chaos. So you could have, Xi Jinping has given himself the ability to have infinite terms and stock the Standing Committee and the Politburo with people who seem to be willing to give him infinite terms, but whether he'd get infinite terms past, age 80, especially if the Chinese economy continues to be in the doldrums for those years, that's really a question. So also America will complete its military modernization around then, and right around then China's demographic issues start to hit. The demographic issues aren't really hitting this decade because China has the double echo, the second order echo of the baby boom coming through the pipe, which is going to make China's working age population will be stable for the rest of this decade, and then it starts this long sort of downward trend. But then they're fine through the end of this decade. After that, and also, if you didn't, also, manufacturing is slowly migrating out of China. Like China's probably at or near its peak manufacturing, although they're pouring so much money into high-tech manufacturing, they're not making profit off it. It's probably not a sustainable strategy. You're just gonna, if you keep doing that, eventually turn into a giant Soviet Union. So I think they're gonna stop doing that. And so I think maybe tariffs will help them along. So that's what one of my 2 pieces from now I'm gonna write about that. So. Anyway, so basically, if we get to 2031, 2032 without a Taiwan war, without a general East Asia war, the danger of this drops significantly. So I think, for better or worse, I think that means that Trump is going to be president during the time of our greatest danger, and who knows what the hell he's going to do. So far, he has a tendency to really lambast and attack America's allies and sort of give a pass to America's enemies.
Yeah, you've presumably been tracking what's been happening last 24, 48 hours on that front. Do you see this as just sort of, when he says Gulf of America, is that just needless sort of attacking? The charitable case, some people say, oh, no, he's negotiating. He's, sort of changing the Overton window, and, his sort of style is how you get a better deal.
The Overton window of what? What issue?
Oh, well, I guess
the Overton window is usually we think of as the range of positions you can take on an issue, right. fully private self-security universal.
Term, but America's negotiation posture, it's I'm not saying I'm not saying
negotiation
I agree with this,
for
but
what?
the position is in general,
Greenland?
for the defense of his negotiation posture is, hey, America has been taken advantage of for a long time, especially as it relates to China, especially as it relates to some of these agreements, and taking a more sort of hostile posture allows us to maybe get to parity, so we stop getting taken advantage of.
By who? Denmark?
China,
Panama?
Europe. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. And so I think, I honestly think that, I think he's just having a bit of fun. Canada, the 51st state, he's just trolling. And I think, we're gonna conquer Greenland, conquer the Panama Canal. I think he's just, he feels that essentially he has infinite power, carte blanche to just do whatever. And so why not troll? Why not push people around a little bit? It's just, he's it's not very severe bullying because I don't think he's actually going to do anything. But maybe I'll be proved wrong about that. But I think it's just a little bullying for fun. The United States acted like a benevolent hegemon for so long that people thought that we were always nice and they could sort of appeal to our morals and blah blah blah. These are not necessarily people who deserve bullying. Like Panama didn't do anything. They're just sitting there operating the canal. That's all they do. They're just like gatekeepers of the canal. That's the entire nation of Panama. And then he's just like out of the blue, he's just like, we're going to seize your canal. Why? I mean, like maybe, if China tries to like seize it, we could stop them and Greenland, I would love to buy Greenland. I think that would be cool. Conquer Greenland? Like why would, like what? That he's not going to do that, and that doesn't make sense. I would buy Greenland though. That'd be cool. Yeah. And but then like Canada 51st state's just a joke. Like that's him being silly. Governor Trudeau, he's just being a goofball.
And let's say you just wrote about Trudeau. He just resigned. When we think about his legacy, is it fair to say that it's just fair, will be very negative, or how should we think about Trudeau's legacy?
Yeah. So basically, on socio-cultural issues, whatever, I have a lot of problems with some stuff that Canada's done, but then I think that that's sort of a matter for Canadians to resolve. Like my opinions on that as not a member of Canadian society don't necessarily concern any Canadians, or they don't give a shit. But on economic matters, it's a little more objective. Trudeau was a crappy steward of the Canadian economy. So the Canadian economy has been having this problem since the 1980s, at least, or since the 1980s or 1990s, which is low productivity. And Canadian productivity has not just been lower in the United States, but it's actually stagnated. So as the United States productivity grew, Canada's productivity didn't. It's associated with a chronic drought of business investment, not just investing in capital and buying, although it is that, investing in capital, buying machinery and whatnot, but it's also a chronic drought of investment in innovation. So Canada has not been very innovative. I mean, there was this small burst of innovation where you heard of a couple things. You've heard of like the Palm Pilot, right? Or Shopify. Like there's a couple things that come out of Canada, but by and large, like innovations don't really come out of Canada. And so it's the sleepy sort of stagnant, unproductive economy. And this has been a problem for decades and decades. And it seems to have gotten worse in the years since the pandemic. But Trudeau didn't do a thing about it. What happened since the 2000s, for the last 25 years, what happened was that oil came into the Canadian economy. They discovered a bunch of oil, they exploited a bunch of oil, and they did this, and they really ramped up oil production, and that sort of created a Band-Aid on this festering long-term problem of low productivity and low investment and low innovation. And so Canadian leaders used oil as basically an excuse to do nothing about the rest of the economy. Classic petrostate resource curse bullshit. And so Alberta became the driver of the Canadian economy, and then the rest just stagnated. And so Trudeau did nothing about this. And then around the time Trudeau came to power, oil prices crashed, which sent the Canadian economy into stagnation. But then even when oil prices somewhat partially recovered, Canadian business investment did not recover. And so the sort of the oil Band-Aid is now gone, and everybody can see the stagnation of Canada. Now that oil isn't propping them up anymore. Some people have said that Canada's main problem is a lack of housing. It is true that they do need to build more housing, but they're building a lot more housing than America is per person, right? Their home building, I think, is double the size of the economy in Canada that it is in America. So like they're not, they're not doing amazing at home building like Japan is, but they're not doing terrible either. In terms of immigration, Canada's always had this great high skilled immigration system, but then under Trudeau, under Trudeau's predecessor, but increasingly under Trudeau, they started letting in a bunch of sort of low skilled immigration under, sort of temporary workers, lower skilled immigration. And then, it benefited the economy less. You can increase headline GDP, but it didn't increase living standards for the average Canadian to let those temporary workers in by the mass numbers. And so that didn't really help. But I think because it increased total GDP, it sort of provided another Band-Aid. It sort of papered over these long-term problems. Basically, Trudeau didn't try to address these long-term problems at all. He just papered over them. He just thought that oil and sort of temporary worker immigration would paper over some of these problems, but they didn't really. And since the pandemic, Canada's stagnation has become apparent, and now we've seen the fall of Trudeau. So we'll see if Oliver, whatever his name is, can do better.
What would be your biggest advice to the next administration?
Figure out what the hell's going on. Like, do everything you can to figure out why Canadian businesses are not investing, and get them to invest. Change whatever policies you have to. Deregulation, support for innovation, industrial policy, all this stuff. Whatever you have to do, financial policy, whatever you have to do, get those Canadian companies to start investing and to start innovating. Yeah. That's the main goal. And then, so I don't have a clear pat solution to this, but I read a whole ton of people who analyzed it, like 20 different people who analyzed this, and none of them had ideas yet. So the first order of business is figure out what the hell's going on. Yeah. And then use all available tools to fix it. And so that needs to be, because oil is not going to paper over it anymore, and immigration isn't going to paper over it anymore either. And so, anyway, that's what they needed. That's what Oliver needs to do.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the 51st state thing. Obviously, it's a crazy idea, but America did used to be an expansive, empire. Is it fair to say that basically we stopped expanding sort of directly, but we sort of did it implicitly by, letting states and countries be their sovereign, but having bases, having partnerships with them where they effectively serve us, but are able to be sovereign, or what is the reason why that's an insane idea to postulate that the U.S. would expand beyond 50 states, and inclusive of some of our neighbors?
You mean what? Like if people want to join us, you mean? Or if we want to send our army in to conquer people and subjugate them? Are you talking about sending our army in to conquer and subjugate people?
No, but some sort of, I guess is there something in between? Maybe it's
really? You're asking like why shouldn't we conquer and subjugate people? Well,
or could we make it more attractive that they would want to join the U.S.?
I mean, if people want to join the U.S., I think we should probably let them. Puerto Rico wants to be a state, we should let them. And if Puerto Ricans are kind of a bit divided between more would like to be a state than be independent, but I think they settle on the status quo as a territory, a non-state, non-represented territory as sort of an intermediate option. Greenland, make it a state. Why not? If they wanna, absolutely.
But just to remember this for a second, in the same way that every individual wants to, and not everyone, so many Mexicans want to come here, the better cost of living. Mm-hmm. Could we make an offer to Mexico to be a part of the U.S. that would make it in their economic interest?
Okay, but sure, but Republicans have spent so much time. They're just so insanely angry about Mexican people crossing over here. By a couple million Mexicans crossing over to America. There's 100-something million Mexicans. Do you want 100-something million? Then Mexicans then become the majority in America, and they get to vote for president, and they get to determine who's president. Okay. Want that?
No, I imagine they wouldn't want Mexico.
You color in more territory as America on the map, and then Mexicans get to determine who's president, determine who's Congress, determine everything, in America through voting. I know that Hispanics have sort of been shifting toward the Republicans, but are Republicans ready for that?
No.
Are you ready to put Mexicans in charge of America? Okay. What do you what are people talking about? And if you annex Canada, which you can't because Canada doesn't want to be annexed, and like if you tried, they just stop us, right? Like we tried that once before, they beat us. You know that? We invaded Canada in 2012. They defeated us.
Yeah, and why don't they want to join us? Because they just have a good thing going.
They burned down the White House. If we invaded Canada, China would immediately flood them with more weapons than we would know how to deal.
Wow.
And there's 40 million Canadians. There's 320 million of us, right? We're 8 times the size of them, but with massive amounts of Chinese weaponry and drones and stuff, just like infinite ammo, Chinese drones and missiles and stuff like that. There's no fucking way we could conquer them without nuclear weapons. Like, this is insane. This is like us trying to do what Russia's trying to do to Ukraine with predictably similar results. Why would you do that? And then if you did conquer Canada and then made those people voting citizens or somehow annexed Canada, actually turned it into the 51st state, libs would just win every election.
Yeah.
And to Republicans, I say, okay, you want that? Do you want the libs to just win all the elections all the time? Do you think you can just like cancel elections and make America like a dictatorship and stuff like that? Do you think that would actually work? Do you think people would think of that?
Yeah.
It's dumb. Like, it's silly. Right. We're entertaining these things on this podcast because someone said them on Twitter, and they said them on Twitter for attention because what you do on Twitter is to get attention, and they're silly.
Right.
Like, but they're also things that Republicans probably shouldn't want, because conquering Canada or Mexico will make Democrats win forever.
Yeah.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102. Most of you probably know how much the Turpentine team loves Notion, the sponsor of today's episode. We use it every day for editorial planning, transcript markups, project managing, knowledge sharing, and it's where I drop random 3 a.m. ideas that turn into episodes. Now it has the power of AI, built right inside of Notion and woven across our entire workspace. It's been a total game changer for our productivity and focus. We just used it the other day to architect the content schedule for next month across our network. Notion combines your notes, docs, and projects into one space that's simple and beautifully designed. The fully integrated Notion AI helps you work faster, write better, and think bigger, doing tasks that normally take you hours in just seconds. Try Notion for free when you go to notion.com/upstreampod. That's all lowercase letters. Notion.com/upstreampod to try the powerful, easy to use Notion AI today. And when you use our link, you're supporting our show. That's notion.com/upstreampod.
Speaking of the libs and Republicans, we were talking this on DM briefly. I was sort of struck by Elon getting involved. Like, why is he getting involved in European politics? And sort of thinking about why has there been, to the extent that there has been, sort of a global shift to the right in some places, or at least a Western shift to the right. And you said something interesting, which is that people have kind of forgotten about the protests in 2019. A lot of people in that thread pointed to COVID and things since 2020, but there's some things that are happening, before to 2020. And I want to give attention to your thinking on when you were talking about the protests.
Right. So we had big protests in 2020, but the world had big protests in 2019. And so those included, the biggest protests were Hong Kong, which turned out like half the population of Hong Kong, Chile, which resulted in a new constitutional convention, which didn't actually change the constitution. But they got mad and some people died in the protest. It included Iran, Iraq, Nicaragua, Bolivia, a whole bunch of other places. Spain, there was a sort of an ethnic separatist protest in Catalonia. And so you had various protests all around the world. There were a lot more. There were a lot of others too. But there was this giant wave of protests around the world in 2019. And there were Britain had protests. And I don't know what they were protesting over. Maybe just the fact they're British. I don't know. But yeah, so and of course France, but that's like every Tuesday. So there were massive and Russia had all these anti-Putin protests that we now forget in 2019. So 2019 was really the year of protests. And then 2020 sort of continued that. We had the big protests in America. We had protests everywhere. Why were there such protests? Well, Martin Gurri and Zeynep Tufekci both wrote books about this. Zeynep wrote Twitter and Tear Gas, and Martin Gurri wrote The Revolt of the Public. And I think the general conclusion was that the reason people were protesting is because they could. Because new apps, especially Twitter, but especially Telegram, but also Twitter and Instagram and iMessage, made it very easy to organize flash mob protests everywhere. And so Martin Gurri pointed out that there's never any shortage of things to protest, because if you run out of present injustices, you can protest historical injustices. So you can. So Chile was protesting against the fact that their constitution had been written under a dictator, even though the constitution then implemented democracy that then voted out said dictator and caused a period of unprecedented freedom and prosperity for Chile. But the fact that the constitution was written under a dictator, like people had grievance about this historical thing that they could protest. And then they called another constitutional convention and then rejected the output of it. Great. But anyway, yeah, it's like the famous line when Marlon Brando is in Rebel Without a Cause, and they said, "What are you rebelling against?" He says, "What do you got?" And so that's, I think, in Hong Kong, obviously, people were rebelling against. Now, I went to the Hong Kong protests. Do you remember that story?
When was this?
Oh, that was 2019. So I went in the fall of 2019 when protests. I missed the very biggest week of protests, but then I got to see some pretty big ones, and I got to see an all-night riot in the neighborhoods of TST and Mong Kok. I got to see an all-night riot, and I ended up the police tried to arrest me and my friend, and we had to escape through a secret maintenance stair and up to the roof of a skyscraper from the cops, and run behind the back of police through alleyways to escape. And it was kind of a young adult novel kind of situation. There were mysterious, beautiful women involved here, because some of these protester girls were helping us escape. And my friend thought one of them was very beautiful. I was like, "Ask her out." He's like, "No, we're in the middle of a protest. We're about to get arrested." So he refused to ask her out. I was like, "Come on, man."
Wow.
Anyway, I don't know. I'm not going to out who that friend was, but he was on the Taiwan trip, and I think you'll like him when you hang out with him. But anyway, but yeah, so we went there, and then and we had this young adult novel sort of adventure, and the old security guard helped us escape onto the roof of that building, and then through the maintenance stair, and then he gave us this thumbs up, and I whispered to my friend "The peasants are helping the rebels," and he just was trying not to crack up, but we couldn't really laugh loud because there might be cops in the building who would arrest us and throw us in Hong Kong jail. And then we saw Hong Kong police just tackling a bunch of people. We saw crazy stuff that night. We got tear gas 4 times, I think. And then we saw a bunch of protesters beating up some guy, and we saw some protesters hurling bricks into tour buses. And we also saw police beating up protesters. We saw lots of stuff. We saw police the police were throwing everyone down and arresting them. 2 more minutes and we would have been arrested. So we ducked into this apartment. But anyway, yeah, we saw there was a firebombing, stuff smashed, people ripping up lampposts right off the street and hurling them in front of the police, water cannons. I ran at a water truck, which was very dumb. Don't do that. But it didn't blast me, thankfully. And we did get pastry and noodles in the middle of a riot. That happened. When there was a tear gas attack, and then we were we like Indiana Jones rolled under this closing shutter of this noodle shop so we could eat noodles. None of us had to reach out and grab our hat though, because we didn't have hats. But we just dropped and rolled under this closing shutter, like us and a couple of protesters who were with us. And then anyway, I mean, we didn't even protest, but they don't care about the distinction. Like we were just there to see. I should have gotten a press pass actually, but then that would have probably saved me from getting arrested, maybe. But then yeah. Anyway, it was pretty nuts. So I saw that, and I did not go to Chile. I did not see the protest there. Maybe I should have gone. I didn't go. And but yeah, it was nuts, man. Anyway, we forget that, and people protested because they could, because it was a thing you could do really easily with social media. It turned out you could like whip up some reason to protest. Now, the Hong Kong people, I think, had a right to protest, and what I realized was that they were protesting against the destruction of the Cantonese language. But Catalonia is protesting against the destruction of the Catalan language. So we think that like when we see a rich free country like Spain, and people protesting against like the destruction of their language, you're like, come on, man, Spain's nice, settle down. But then like Hong Kong, it's like, yes, freedom and democracy, but like, you know, it's really a linguistic, ethnic protest in both cases. And anyway, and of course Hong Kong would love independence. They don't, you know, and then have their own language, but they don't get that because China's too big and powerful and will now destroy the Cantonese language and just turn it into yet another Mandarin-speaking Chinese city. So that sucks. But anyway, that wave of protest that hit America a year later in 22, although I think we could see the harbingers of it even earlier, like 2014, 2015. In America, you had the initial BLM protests. You could see the and Twitter and tear gas and the revolt of the public were written before the big 2019 protests, I think. But you could, you know, and even before that, you had Occupy Wall Street, you had the Tea Party, you had rumblings since the early 2010s. But then as these apps became more prevalent, you really just saw this age of discontent all over the world. And it just kept rising and rising. And then it exploded in 2019, 2020. And I think after that, you saw this yearning for crackdown. This yearning for control and for the reassertion of authority and for an end to the chaos, a yearning for order. And I think that yearning for order has manifested as a conservative movement in the rich countries. And in Russia, I think it manifested as war.
Is it as simple as the pendulum shift, like, you know, in the 2010s, the shift towards the left, and then just sort of a globally, or at least in the West, and then sort of a pendulum shift back? Or is that too crude or not true?
I don't know, because in Europe, I think some people are yearning for order by wanting to support, like, you know, AfD or whoever, these right-wing parties. But some people are yearning for order by wanting a lot more regulation. Like, I think the push for massive over-regulation of tech is part of the push for order, because I think people correctly perceive that social media and the online sphere was what was causing this disorder, and they want to regulate it. So like Thierry Breton, or whatever that dude's name is, I can't pronounce names. Thierry Breton, who's like, regulate this, regulate that, the EU Parliament trying to regulate the hell out of everything, including Twitter. Like, this is, I think, part of the yearning for order, crackdown on social media itself. And I think that in Britain, you can see the yearning for order in the crackdown on the people who are like attacking immigrants over the rape gangs. So the rape gang thing is old, right? That was a while ago. They had that. And then some people who recently, like, you know, found out about it, got mad about it, attacked some immigrant neighborhoods, and then Britain cracked down very hard on them and imprisoned people for social media posts, right? Obvious violation of freedom of speech, obvious, you know, authoritarian government shit, not good. But I think it's part of the yearning for order, but it's what we might call left-wing order. And so I think it's not quite as easy as like right-left pendulum swings. I think it's more about order versus chaos. And I think the pendulum is swinging back hard toward people demanding order.
Yeah. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so people using the tools that they have at their disposal, or things that they think will bring order to do so. What do you make of Elon getting involved in sort of European politics from afar, but in a sort of, you know, powerful direct way? Is he correct? What do you think?
I think it will probably backfire in terms of actually causing Europe to support Elon's things, because it's sort of an external enemy that the over regulatory, moderately left wing Eurocrat regime, they can unite against this external enemy. They can say Elon is fomenting disorder in our societies. We have to unite, preserve order, and repel this invading guy, right? Which they can easily do by, Europe can just ban Twitter and Tesla. Like, Europe can fuck Tesla's profits in a day, and then you just say no more Teslas, and Europeans like, okay, I'll buy a BYD. Like, BYD is fine. Like, it's not quite as high quality as Tesla, but it's about half the price. Like, it's Europeans will be fine buying BYD or whatever else China's got to sell, and then just say, okay, no more Tesla, or they'll buy a Volkswagen, and then say, okay, no more Twitter. And Brazil did this, and Elon backed down. Remember, like, Brazil's like, okay, no more Twitter, and Elon's like, okay, and then Europe is a much bigger market than Brazil, and they're a big market for Tesla too. Europe can just smack Elon Musk around if it wants. It's like, Elon Musk has a lot of influence over Donald Trump, but Donald Trump, what is Donald Trump going to do to Europe? Like, nothing, because Europe is Donald Trump can yell at Europe, but he's not really going to do anything. He can put tariffs on Europe. But honestly, that's not going to that's going to hurt America just as much, and people will yell, and it'll make Donald Trump less popular, and then Donald Trump will realize that defending Elon Musk's business interests in Europe has gotten him unpopular. And then there might be a breakup between Trump and Musk, and then Musk loses that power too. So Europe can just defeat Elon Musk if it wants, but I don't think it necessarily will, because I think Elon is just, finding this week's current thing, right? I support current thing. Europe, fuck Europe. And, honestly, I do like seeing Britain cyberbullied, because Britain, someone said the other day that when they talk to British people constantly talk about America and how much it sucks and how awful it is. And you just have mass shootings every day, and nobody has healthcare, and just all these sort of center left myths of America's horribility that British people have allowed themselves to believe, because it allows themselves to distract themselves or feel less bad about the stagnation, decline of their own society. It's cope, right? They cope by telling themselves Americans don't have healthcare. Americans have more healthcare than you, and we pay a lower percentage of costs out of pocket than you, and we wait less times than you for healthcare, and we have better healthcare than Britain all around. I mean, it's more expensive, but you know what? We're so much richer, we can pay for it. We can afford it. So it's but we have better healthcare than Britain. Oh, we have NHS. Well, but then yes, you have NHS, but it's the things the NHS does is shrinking the amount of stuff it covers, and people are oh, but it's because we're cutting our NHS because we listen to Milton Friedman and the libertarians, blah, blah, blah. No, it's because you can't afford it because you're a poor country. And so you could afford it before when you were sort of a rich country, but now you're a poor country and you can't. So Elon cyberbullying Britain is fine. I like that, because Britain has this insane cope-based, nasty little inferiority complex toward America, and they need to shut the fuck up and fix their society, and just stop yelling about how these myths about how Americans don't have healthcare and have a mass shooting every day. Shut the hell up. Go fix your society. So I love Elon cyberbullying them. Also, Britain doesn't have freedom of speech. Britain needs freedom of speech. Canada too. These countries, freedom of speech would help these countries a lot. I'm not talking about freedom of speech in that you have right-wing people on Twitter. I'm talking freedom of speech in the real sense of you can't go to jail for posting, just stuff on social media. You can say nasty shit on social media without going to jail for that. That's what Britain and Canada need that. And so I support Elon cyberbullying them, although I don't think it'll be very effectual, but I think it is amusing anyway.
I'm surprised he's so invested in European politics in a way that seems more so than he's invested in even San Francisco local politics in his own country. I haven't seen Elon be Dean Preston sucks, or Michael Lai needs to win, or whatever. I'm surprised he's not sort of getting more involved in stuff in our biggest cities.
Urban politics, he doesn't care that much about. I mean, he's delocalized. He's a rootless cosmopolitan, right? Yeah. He lives where Elon's home is where is Elon's bed. Wherever Elon sleeps, that is home to Elon. He just travels around, because he has infinite money. And So I don't know.
I'm
I don't think he
surprised.
cares about local
He
politics.
took over Twitter. He didn't try to buy a new social network, but he left San Francisco, I guess, and moved to Austin. I'm surprised he didn't just say, "Hey, here's $100 million. Let's take over, San Francisco politics."
I mean, I think he's a digital nomad.
What'd you say?
He's a digital nomad.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know why he didn't get involved in that. Just what he cares about, right? When you have infinite money, you get involved in what you care about, and you do whatever you want. And so, like, he's getting involved in politics. He's using his money to like threaten Republicans to primary them. If they don't vote for this or that, Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know. I hope people don't confirm Tulsi Gabbard. She's shit. But anyway, yeah. So he's throwing his weight around wherever, and he bought Twitter. There's many reasons to buy Twitter, but then I think the number one reason is so he can be like shit poster number one and change the algorithm to boost his own stuff. So basically what he says is law. I think the one reason he's cyberbullying Europe is because he got in this very vicious fight with the alt-right, with the racist, nativist right. He got in this very vicious fight with them and said, like, fuck yourself in the face, and I will go to war, the likes of which you cannot imagine. And it lasted for 2 weeks, about 2 weeks, right? And then it was incredibly vicious around Christmas time about high-skilled immigration. Elon supports high-skilled immigration. I support Elon about that. Elon is right. And he got Trump to agree with him, and that's good. Hell yeah, Elon. Good job. And I really despise the people that he was opposing. Like, the people who are attacking Elon, I really despise those people. So, like, Elon won because the system is set up so that he can just press a button and win. That's what buying Twitter means. And but at the same time, I think it caused a lot of people to say, like, oh, look, there's fractured coalition within the right. So I think he wants he doesn't want to back down. He doesn't want to lose. He basically won that dispute, but he doesn't want to like stay there yelling about how H-1Bs are great for the rest of his life. He wants to get onto something where he can, reharness that rightist populist energy, and that means bashing Europe. Talking about the immigration crisis in Europe that unites Elon and the right. It gets him his rightist cred back, so that he doesn't have to be shit poster. He doesn't have to be like king shit poster by pressing an algorithmic button. He can be king shit poster by getting like a bunch of rightists on his side, like he used to before they all split up over H-1B. So now it's kind of mending fences with the online Twitter right, because they all hate Muslim immigration to Europe.
But is there anything worth commenting on over the sort of Christmas holidays debate about or intra war between sort of the tech right or cosmopolitan right and sort of nativist nationalist right? Is there anything that we learned from that, or does that debate change anything in our mind, or is that just kind of like a holiday Twitter war, self-contained, that has no impact on anything?
Here's the thing. I mean, Trump won because Latinos, and to a lesser degree Asian and Black people, but especially Latinos, shifted toward Trump. That is why Trump won. If white people decided the election, like if Latinos hadn't shifted, if they voted the same way they voted in 2020, Trump would have lost that election, right? White people shifted a tiny bit toward the Democrats. This was not a white backlash story. 2016, you could spin as a white backlash story. This one, you can't. It was Latinos who delivered Trump that victory, and Asian and Black people, although they lived in less strategic areas. But yeah, so non-white people shifted toward Trump. That's the Republican coalition. Now you have a non-trivial number of Latinos, Asians, and even Black people. That is the Republican coalition. So you have this big Republicanism, this big tent conservatism that people voted for. And then you get these alt-right guys who were sort of in the driver's seat in 2016, 2017, the Unite the Right, Charlottesville Nazis, those assholes, right? You get these people thinking that this was a victory for them, and that not understanding that the Republicans have to have this new big tent coalition in order to keep winning. They were just like, okay, we're in the driver's seat. We're going to ban all immigration. We're going to revoke birthright citizenship. We're going to kick out all the non-white people, blah, blah, blah. The same kind of shit that they thought in 2017 after Trump, eked out this narrow victory with white backlash as the driver. This time it wasn't white backlash. It was non-white backlash. And so, white people had shifted a little bit back toward the Democrats. And then, so then these guys, all these like sort of now aging kind of millennial Nazi people they were like, yeah, this is our moment again, we win. And then like, but someone had to tell them, no, this is not your moment. This is a different conservative coalition. This is different. Trump 2024 is different than Trump 2016. It is a different coalition, and they have to respect that. The fact that the conservative coalition now includes a lot of non-white people, and they're conservative. They hate wokeness, right? But at the same time, you know, they don't want America to be a racialized society. They hate wokeness, but they're not, you know, going to say like, okay, you sons of the soil, America's founding stock, you're the ones who are really in charge, and we will, you know, simply vanish and, you know, vote for you and then vanish and let you kick us out of the country. Like, no, they're not going to do that. And so, like, I think the alt-right got over their skis and misunderstood who the new conservative coalition was. Elon represents the new conservative coalition much more than you know, some like writer for the Blaze or some shit, you know, or more than these Nazi guys. And so Elon had to put them in their place and tell them, look, and Trump had to put them in their place. And H-1Bs and the fight over Indian immigration was a convenient way to settle who's in the driver's seat of the new Trump coalition. And I think that was settled, and they're mad about it, and they can cope and seethe because they lost. Now they're along for the ride, just like the conservative Christians were along for the ride in 2016. Like, conservative Christians got a lot of what they wanted, right? In the first Trump term, they got, you know, judges who would eventually, you know, kill Roe versus Wade. They got a lot of stuff that they really wanted, but no one ever thinks that conservative Christians are actually were driving the first Trump administration. Christian coalition politics was dead. It was that block was along for the ride. They got some of what they wanted, but they were a junior partner, and no one thought that was what Trump was really about, right? And so I think that the alt-right racist Twitter, as people call it, those guys are not in the driver's seat now. They can get some of what they want. They can get reduced immigration, right? They can get maybe some like symbolism of like American heritage, blah, blah. And they can get reduced immigration. Maybe they can get some Confederate statues. I don't know. But then, but they don't get to boss Trump around. They're a junior partner, just like the you know, right-wing Christians were in Trump's first term. That's my read on that whole H-1B fight, is that it was essentially the tech right, which is a diverse group, has a lot of Indians in it, saying to the alt-right, you know, you don't have the human capital to run this movement. You don't have the human capital to run the country. You know, sit down, let the smart conservatives run shit.
Yeah, that's good.
And we'll give you some of what you want in the form of reduced immigration.
Some people use the term the woke right as a way of saying that they're kind of similar to the far left, but just the right version of it. Do you think that's a helpful comparison or analogy?
Maybe. I mean, it's just an insult. I don't know. You know, there's differences, there's similarities, but I don't think that anyone takes that term seriously enough to care. I think it's just an insult. I mean, yeah, go ahead, insult those people. Those people suck. I don't like this. Call them woke if you want. Call them idiots, low IQ, subtards. You know, call them whatever, because they deserve it. You know, they're trying to kill my country. They're trying to destroy America by starting a racial civil war. Like, fuck you. Go sit down, shut up. I wish they weren't in any winning coalition at all. I wish they weren't part of any coalition at all. I wish they would just go and like play video games and fuck off. They won't, because they don't want to. And it's a democracy, and they get a vote. They get, you know, they get free speech. They get everything, etc. They get to be permanently here. But like, those people are fundamentally anti-American, and Elon was right to point that out.
But with about 15 minutes left, I want to make sure we get to or deeper on China, because you had a couple good posts. And we talked about it a little bit in past episode, but you wrote, you know, fleshed it out a little bit. This idea of how do we measure whether China's economy is ahead of America's, in terms of how do we even evaluate that? What is sort of the wrong way of thinking about it? What's the right way of thinking about it? Do you want to share just high level
of China, like the macroeconomy, or?
Yeah.
So, yeah. China right now has a shortage of aggregate demand. You can see Chinese interest rates falling and falling and falling. When you have a shortage of aggregate demand, what that means is that prices go down, and we see deflation by some indices and zero inflation by other indices, like disinflation or outright deflation, depending on which number you look at. I think they're pretty much clearly in deflation right now. and you see interest rates going down, which means basically like no one wants to borrow money, right? If no one wants to borrow money, you lower interest rates. You're just like, hey guys, please take my money. I won't charge you much interest, I promise. Like that's, you know, me describing supply and demand for loanable funds with a silly voice. Okay. So then that's what happens because no one wants to borrow money. So interest rates are going down. These are all signs of a classic depression style thing. It's what we had after 2008, right? And it's what Japan had after 1990. And it's what we had in the Great Depression, although China's not that bad, but you know, it's bad. It's, China's probably had 1 year of recession in 2023. And then in 2024, their growth probably recovered like 2.5%. Although their official statistics say like 4.5%, whatever, but it's 2.5. That's not terrible for a developing country, but it's still, you know, I think America outgrew them last year. And America's the most, you know, rich of developed countries. So I think that's a poor performance for China. But I think that this, you know, this real estate debt overhang will weigh on growth. Because remember, when prices go down and when wages go down, debt stays the same. That's called debt deflation. Debt stays the same, and the burden of debt, the real burden of debt relative to your income or your ability to pay it off, or corporate income, corporations' ability to pay it off, the real burden of debt goes up and up and up as prices go down and down and down. And that means people spend less, and you get this vicious cycle where people spend less, and that makes prices go down, and that makes, you know, debt more severe, and that makes people spend less, right? You get this, and this is called debt deflation. It's very nasty to get out of this trap. The way you get out of this trap is by bailing everyone out. So China needs to do just massive bailouts. The central government needs to borrow money and use that money to bail out all the idiots who made all the bad bets. And nobody likes that, right? Because then you get all these idiots get rewarded. Of course, China doesn't have to reward them. It can throw the people in jail who made the actual bad bets, put different people in charge, and then bail out the organizations, right? China, you know, after 2008, the Krugman and some people were like, throw some bankers in jail for what they did in, you know, in the financial crisis, but nobody did. We didn't throw any bankers in jail. But then China just throws people in jail. They just do that. That's their MO. So they could actually do that. So bailouts are what they need to do. That will support lending. That will get this debt overhang gone. That will eliminate the balance sheet recession. Bail out everybody. Bail out the banks. Bail out the, you know, local government financing vehicles. Bail out the shadow banks, bail out the wealth management products, bail out the trust products, and bail out some of the developers too. Yes, it's moral hazard. You're rewarding bad behavior. You can fix that by like just tossing some people in jail, which you will anyway because you're China. Bail them all out. Get them lending again. That's what they need to do. Will they do that? I cannot tell you whether they will do that. Xi Jinping is a financial conservative. He's averse to bailouts. Xi Jinping is like a boomer dad. And boomer dads don't like bailouts because it rewards bad behavior and it encourages central government profligacy and debt. So they don't like it. So it's going to be like pulling teeth to get these people to bail these people out.
So they won't do their own version of TARP or whatever we did back in the day?
No. I mean, they will. It'll just take them a long time.
You also wrote about some of the theories or reasons as to why productivity has slowed down there. Can you share some of that?
Yeah. So productivity, one big reason it slowed down is because the Chinese economy reoriented itself toward real estate. Real estate has lower productivity growth. It doesn't have high productivity in the first place. And, you know, so China basically did stimulus and avoided recession in the Great Recession and during their stock market crash of 2015 and in a couple other smaller crises by just pumping up real estate. Then it crashed and you can't pump up real estate anymore. So now Xi Jinping's idea is, okay, we're going to pump up manufacturing. They could pump up infrastructure, but they've already got all these bridges to nowhere. So they're like, okay, let's pump up manufacturing. Well, what happens when you do that? What happens when you build 1 billion cars and 1 billion batteries and solar panels and, you know, webcams and laptops and, you know, like cars and scooters and delivery robots and, you know, all these things? What happens when tablets? I don't know what you build. You build everything, right? Every electronics thing and every machinery thing and every transportation equipment thing. You build all the things. And what happens? Well, prices go down. You're glutting the market. So they want to avoid this by exporting to everybody, by saying, okay, well, we can't sell all this shit within China because we're having a recession and we're just glutting the market by pumping up supply when we should be pumping up demand, but we're pumping up supply instead. Let's send all this stuff overseas and the Americans and Europeans will buy it. And the Americans like, no, tariffs. And then the Europeans are like, perhaps tariffs. And so, and then the more America blocks their stuff, and this hasn't fully happened yet because Trump hasn't fully unleashed the tariffs yet. Biden unleashed some tariffs, but Trump may unleash more. And so then what happens is that they're like, okay, I guess we can't sell to America. I guess we'll go sell to Europe. And then Europe is like, wait a second. Now we're bearing the brunt of all this flood of exports that's destroying our domestic industry and all these politically powerful manufacturing industries, blah, blah. No, fuck you. Get out, Chinese cars. Or what they'll actually just do is force China to relocate all the production to Europe. That's what Europe will do, which is good. Good for Europe. It's a developing country strategy. Maybe Europe's a developing country now. Great, do that. And then, but that still means that Chinese made products are piling up in the Chinese market. They try to sell them to like Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia will buy some stuff, but they don't have that much money. Latin America, they'll buy some stuff, but they're like, Southeast Asia is the only region that isn't like heavily protecting against Chinese imports. And even then you're starting to see like Indonesia, like start erecting tariff barriers against the flood of against the second China shock. And so all that stuff will then be diverted back into China and all the, where it'll cause deflation and it'll exacerbate the problems. And that's what happens when you pump up supply in response to a recession. Like, you must understand aggregate demand. Keynes was right. Pump up demand because a deficiency of demand is the problem.
And Friedman thought that was incorrect?
No, I mean, Friedman thought it was correct. The difference between Friedman and Keynes was that Keynes thought you should pump up demand by having the government spend money, while Friedman thought that you should pump up demand by having the Federal Reserve print money. And those are two different approaches, monetary versus fiscal policy. Turns out you probably need both.
You think they were both right effectively, or that both are good methods?
Yes. And so what we saw in the Great Recession was quantitative easing and fiscal stimulus both had some effect.
And flesh out go to the crux of the disagreement. Friedman thinks that government doing it just will be sort of inefficient or ineffective, and Keynes think the opposite because sort of the data bears it out, basically, that has been effective.
He worries that using monetary policy too much will result in inflation. Friedman worries that using government spending, borrowing too much will result in all kinds of like economic inefficiencies. They're probably both right eventually. I mean, like, I think that we did actually cause inflation with some of the stuff when the 2020s rolled around, when we did this stuff in response to COVID. Yeah, I mean, like, I think those are both reasonable worries, but in the end, I think recessions suck and you should do what you can to get out of them by minimizing the downsides at the same time.
And so if you were in charge or helping fix this problem on the productivity side, is there anything else you would recommend beyond what we've recommended so far?
On the productivity side of China?
Yeah.
I mean, China needs better services for productivity. I think service industries improving will be good for Chinese productivity. Manufacturing's fine and good. I think they're doing fine on that front. I think they need to increase services, improved services, even though it's not gonna give you the military muscle to like conquer Asia, but like, don't do that. You don't need to conquer Asia. Conquering Asia is dumb. Conquering anything is dumb. Conquering Greenland is dumb. Conquering Panama is dumb. Conquering things is dumb. Don't do it. It will result in woe. It will result in bad things happening to your country. Even if you win, you're in trouble. And so like, that is my message. Like, conquering is silly.
Full circle.
Full circle, yeah.
Well, maybe as a last closing point, and then I'll get you out of here. Next week we're going to have Scott Sumner, and we'll talk about industrial policy. You wrote a really interesting post about Biden's legacy and how there's some things that he did that are great and that you're big fans of, but there's some things that either didn't reach their potential or have more of a mixed message. Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah. So recently Biden blocked the Nippon Steel deal, which was very stupid, not just geopolitically, although it was stupid geopolitically. We need to create a unified market with Japan in order to get the scale to fight China in manufacturing, right? We need Japan to make stuff, and we need to make stuff in Japan. And we need to sell stuff to Japan, and they need to sell stuff to us. We need all this stuff to fight China. And Japan's a very important ally. We just poked him in the face for no reason. And like most of Biden's advisors were against this. So that was bad. But it also, in addition to being geopolitically bad, it was economically bad. Like the rank and file union members wanted this deal because it would result in greater investment, better technology, and more steel production, especially because they were offering all these guarantees. Nippon Steel offered the American government a veto over any production cuts. So they would maintain or expand steel production in America by law. Biden blocked it anyway just because he wanted to seem pro-union, but not because rank and file union members were against the deal, but because the union leader was against the deal. The union leader, like Democrats mistake like spokespeople for like communities. So if union people were for the deal and the union leader was against the deal, Biden will think the union leader equals unions, equals workers. And so he just, it was an act of petulance, and it was it was the kind of standard Democratic, like narrow interest group politics that we've come to sadly expect. But it also, it represents a larger problem within the Biden administration, which is that the Biden administration was very concerned with power, which is to say that the Biden administration was very concerned with giving unions and activist groups who claim to represent various groups of minorities institutional power within the Democratic Party. A lot of these provisions, contracting requirements and blah, 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 you have to hire this much union labor, even in a state with no union people like Arizona. You have to have this many contractors that are owned by minorities and blah, blah. All this stuff, and then a million other DEI kind of things. These were done at the behest of the groups, which don't actually represent the people that these policies are supposed to address or help. And you saw this like activist interest group based Democratic politics style that Ezra Klein and Matt Iglesias have been yelling about. And I think it'll be hard to get rid of that. It's trying to do urban politics at the national level, and it will be long and hard to get rid of that. That doesn't mean industrial policy is a failure. Industrial policy overall has been a success. America now manufactures 80% of our own solar panels. We've gone from 14th in the world to 3rd in the world at manufacturing solar panels, and we cut out Chinese imports. Great. We reshored it. No one's talking about it. I should write a post about it. Chip factories going up everywhere, battery factories going up everywhere. Biden began the rebuilding and the reindustrialization of America. And he did it in ways that were flawed and that Republicans need to fix without killing the policies themselves. Republicans need to remove all the contractor requirements, all the like DEI, all the union stuff from industrial policies without getting rid of the industrial policies. That's what conservative industrial policy looks like, and that's what they need to do.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, in some ways, Biden and Trump have been good either partners or foils for each other in terms of continuing each other's work or sort of complementing it or adding it in some ways, not in all ways, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, political economic paradigms change when both parties agree that there's a need to do the new thing and then argue about how to do it. So when you looked at neoliberalism, if you will, you saw Carter was the great deregulator who just died, right? You saw Reagan cut taxes, and then, Clinton deregulated finance, which he probably shouldn't have done, and then also reformed welfare, which Reagan didn't really do. So each of the parties did neoliberalism in their own way. With the New Deal, Eisenhower built the interstates, and pumped up government research apparatus and all kinds of things like that. And Nixon did a whole bunch of environmental regulations and a whole bunch of anti-poverty programs too. Like the Republicans contributed to the New Deal, just like Democrats contributed to neoliberalism, even though we think of neoliberalism as a purely Republican thing and New Deal is purely a Democrat thing. It was actually a cooperative effort between both parties. And if industrial policy, the new paradigm, is going to succeed, it needs Republican buy-in. It needs people like Orrin Cass, who are thinking of a conservative way to do industrial policy. It needs people at the top to start listening to Orrin Cass instead of the Cato Institute. All right. Industrial policy does work, but it's hard to get right. And they need to clean up the problems of the Democrats without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So that's what needs to happen. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the days to come.
Yeah, that'll be a good segue to a conversation with Scott Sumner, who has a more libertarian bent, of course. Noah, this is a great wide-ranging conversation, catching up on what's happened last week or so. As always, until next time.
Until next time.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and eriktorenberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.